table. All right. All right. Welcome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Very excited to be here at Sport Beach 2023. Colie, I'd love to start with you because you know I'm a huge WNBA fan. I love that I can watch Stewie getting buckets now in a lot of different ways. Walk us through the league's strategy and approach to all these new platforms and streaming and broadcasting your games.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for being a fan. We just signed a really groundbreaking new partnership with Ion. So while there's a lot of diversified distribution channels, for us, we're kind of experiencing the old is new again. So what this partnership does, it allows us to be over the air on one of Scrip's newest platforms, which is their new sports channel. And so we're on Ion every single Friday night with 2 doubleheaders. And when you see all of these cable models really starting to lose subscribers, for me, the play was all about reach and engagement. So right now with this new Ion deal, we're gonna reach over 110 million homes. It's the 5th most watched channel, but also they've made a commitment to marketing and promoting the game. So when we think about the WNBA, the journey is about making it easier to be a fan, and that's what we're doing with our new media distribution.
Dan, it seems like fans and big tech and big platforms are seeking out these sports rights and wanting to watch games more so than ever before. Why do you think sports rights are as coveted as they are now?
Well, I think all of the major players are looking to grow their streaming platforms, NBC included, Peacock being our vehicle. And when you think about how particularly younger people are consuming content, a lot of them are consuming it through streaming. So if we want to preserve the future of our sports business, we need to be streaming. So I think a lot of platforms look at it as a way to drive subscribers, in some cases retain subscribers. When you do the math of what it takes to grow your subscribership, sports actually works out for us, even at some of these escalating rights fees.
And then, Brad, for you, obviously, in the world of marketing and branding, I'd be curious your thoughts on how brands and marketers can target these sports fans when they're no longer consuming the games in the traditional way in which we all grew up watching them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it provides a really interesting creative challenge for agencies. Because I think that, when we used to buy against live sports or tune in, it ran between 7 and 9 at night, and we had a P2+ demo or something like that. And as we move into streaming, not only do you have a finer tune and a finer understanding of the audience, which then is interesting data, but you also have the challenge that it might run at different times. Folks might watch it in delay. But as an agency, what that means is you have a better understanding of that audience. And as an agency, you never want to let your insights and your data show in your creative execution. But it does mean that you can think about interesting and different creative executions because now you understand that audience in a different way. And you're not just buying against a tune-in audience that happens to be running on a Sunday afternoon, but rather an engaged audience that you understand the attitudes and behaviors of. And you can really curate your brand's story to connect with that audience in a much more authentic way if you think about this as an opportunity to get just more relevant from a content perspective.
Doesn't seem like anybody's as relevant these days as Chase Griffin. This man graduated college this week, so can you give him a round of applause? That's pretty killer, guys.
Thank you.
Guys, opponent now hanging out here at Sport Beach. When you're out there playing, how are you thinking about ways to connect with your fans beyond simply where we're watching you on, whether it's CBS or Fox or wherever the game is being broadcast, or NBC?
NBC, yeah. I think as a Bruin, you think of your impact past your sport at all times. That's sort of why I chose UCLA. I was telling Dan backstage, I wanted to leave Texas, and I was looking for schools that maximize my ability on the field, but also off the field. And I think when we're talking about media rights in particular, it's an equity play. NIL was an equity play. And social equity and social progress has been made time and time again by Bruins. And so while I'm out there playing, obviously I'm repping the same school that Jackie Robinson went to, and I take pride in that. But I'm also thinking, how can the impact that I'm creating on the field and off the field lead to better social progress?
And, for fans who are watching these games and connecting with our new favorite athletes, it's a wonderful time to be able to have all these options in how we're watching these games. But Dan, talk to me a little bit about sort of this fragmented landscape and how a network like yours or a platform like yours is able to connect with fans in different ways.
Well, I think, fragmentation is often used in a negative sense, but I think in the case of sports, it's actually a bit of a positive because with, multiple platforms, you can reach viewers in different ways. I mean, we were just discussing how you can get a little bit more precise with who you're reaching, why you're reaching them. The truth is, with some of our bigger sports like the NFL and certainly the Olympics, we're still going to reach a massive amount of people through linear television, and I completely understand why you went that way. But as we ramp up Peacock, which is, shameless plug, the top live streamer in sports right now, we're able to offer our advertisers a lot of different potential solutions, but the common denominator is everybody's watching live. So it is a communal viewing experience, regardless of whether you're watching on a linear connection or a streaming or digital connection.
Colie, as the WNBA continues to grow now globally, do you have a different approach when you're talking about streaming rights and linear rights and rights to the games when you're looking at these different international markets as opposed to the United States?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we are the longest running professional women's sports league, and we are the only professional women's sport league with our own D2C platform. So we have the WNBA League Pass, and I think to reach our international audiences, that's been really the strongest way. For us, it's also about creating household names in these new markets. So when Hanju is coming over from China and you're seeing her play in New York, how can we then bring in more Chinese fans? When you see just the growth of the game domestically, we know that the opportunity is really untapped internationally. And so just this past May, we hosted the first ever preseason game in Canada. We were in Scotiabank, and we sold out 19,800 seats, sold out in 10 minutes. And there's no WNBA team in Toronto. So what does that mean? It means the demand is high.
Do you mind just repeating that for everybody in the back? You said 19,000 tickets sold in 10 minutes.
That's right. Faster than any Raptors game I've heard.
That's great.
That's incredible, and it's amazing how, and Chase, I'll ask you this one, why Gen Z audiences might not be watching the entire game in the traditional sense. They're connecting through social platforms, through streaming platforms. They're wanting to get closer to these athletes than ever before. So talk to me maybe about how Gen Z is consuming games and connecting with these athletes if they're not necessarily watching them in the traditional sense.
I think as athletes demonstrate how well-rounded they are and get more opportunities from brands and media in general, the audience realizes how special of stories these are. And I think when you think about the Olympics, you think of some of the greatest sporting events. It's the story that really connects the audience to the players, to the coaches, to the organizations. And storytelling is such a valuable part of all marketing, which is why athletes in the marketing space have always been valuable. And it's why sports has always been valuable. And in that value creation, I think athletes are beginning to see we should have a part of that. And within the next 3 to 5 years, the college athlete landscape is about to shift. You have the House and Johnson cases in the Supreme Court. You have the Alston case, which has already been decided, which sets a framework for new business legislation in the NCAA business model. So you have athletes who are going to get a piece of this pie, and the other folks who've controlled this the whole time have been saying, well, we don't want to give that piece up. I think that's backwards in thinking, because athletes, once we have a piece of the pie, have a greater incentive to grow the pie for everyone.
Well, obviously, with athletes continuing to have a larger role in content creation and partnerships, Brad, I'd be curious for brands and for marketers, now that the athletes are here and really a part of this, how does that kind of change the conversation?
Yeah, I think the word fragmentation, I think, was used, and it maybe has a little bit of a negative connotation. So, but, as a brand, a strength is what I talked about to begin with, which is the audience and understanding the audience, being able to connect not only the teams and the players and the leagues, but from a brand perspective, the complexity has amped up. If I wanted to before get in on, let's say, NFL, right? I had a couple options on a Sunday. I had a Monday night option. It was easy. Now I've got a Thursday option, and I got a floating option, and I got a Sunday and a 2 options. I got a Monday option. I've got the players, and following the players, and I got this. So now as a brand, before I had basically 2 networks to figure out how to tell a story on, and maybe 3. Now I've got 40 different touch points, and illustratively, and so that complexity, if you don't really have a clear idea of the story you want to tell, can almost become paralyzing. Not only from the content you want to tell the story, but frankly, how you even engage with the media associated with all of that. Brands and agencies, this opportunity on the other side of the coin really enters a lot of complexity. And so I think a really tight strategy cuts through complexity and gets into opportunity. And if you don't have a strategy, you can get kind of lost and kind of spun around your own axle a little bit.
Well, it seems like some of those brands that are obviously making the real push and having a presence felt during these games broadcasting are the gambling companies, right? And that adds a whole nother dynamic to all of this. So, Colie, I'll start with you. What is the WNBA strategy when it comes to sports betting and how to incorporate that into the actual broadcasting of the games?
Yeah, so I think with different networks, we're able to do different things. We're really exploring how do we introduce sports betting to a wider audience. I think if you know a little bit about the WNBA, you will do very well on a FanDuel or a DraftKings. I'll tell you that much. It's not that hard. And I think we offer a really unique opportunity to bet on sport in the summer when there's just not that much going on. But for us, we look at it as deeper engagement. So we launched our first ever full season fantasy game with ESPN and did over 50,000 registered users. We're on track for 100,000 registered users this season. And we believe that if you are invested in the game, you will then watch the game, which really helps this cycle, this somewhat evil cycle that used to be, as you guys on stage know, we're only going to invest our marketing dollars if there's viewers, and we're only going to give you viewers if you have the good windows, and you only get the good windows if you have the advertisers. And that model doesn't work anymore, so we need to apply a new valuation model, especially when it comes to women's sports, and one of those avenues is sports betting. It is streaming, it is storytelling, and additional shoulder content around the game.
And as we head into Paris 2024, Dan, I'd be curious the role of some of these sports betting brands when it comes to your coverage of the Olympics this year, because that's obviously going to be a big part of it.
Well, we have some limitations based on the IOC guidelines, so we won't include any sports betting content in our on-air coverage, certainly not visually. People have been betting on everything since the dawn of time, so there may be sports betting advertising on our air, and certainly the timing of it works nicely because the Olympics will be leading into preseason football where the vast majority of the account acquisitions will be happening. So you'll see some of that. But I just want to touch on sports betting for a minute. NBC has obviously been looking at it for quite some time. We were in business with PointsBet. We still are. But we think that there was this land rush of a moment where you saw, particularly in the advertising marketplace, all the big guys trying to come in and own the space. And now there's sort of a leveling out. And phase 2 will come, and we'll figure out who the winners are and who the losers are. But I do think that, particularly with sports betting, there's a sense of responsibility that needs to come along with it. And we have to be really, really careful how we promote it, encourage it, and make sure that particularly young men are not getting lost in the phenomenon and take care of themselves, and we help them take care of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the idea of sports betting, but you push it into something like fantasy, so maybe a little bit away from a DraftKings idea, the thing that I think gets really interesting in that is it takes the attachment to the team and push it to the attachment to the player.
Yep.
And one of the things we've seen on the brand side over the last handful of years is really a movement of I follow a team to I follow a player. Very, very actually, the shift is really overpronounced in female viewers, surprisingly. And what that opens up for brands, but also for the players, is an opportunity to be a brand themselves, as you were talking about. And so I think the sports betting is one thing, but I think fantasy has really brought that level down. And you can see it in how even people watch some of the TV. You have a running back and you have a wide receiver in the NFL, and you're really into the player. And so I actually think it opens up a ton of opportunities for the athletes to actually, be stronger brands. And frankly, it's just not the top handful of athletes, but it goes way deeper. So for brands, I think that that provides an interesting opportunity to connect with those athletes and have those athletes tell their stories about brands.
I just to add to that, I totally agree. We had about 3 weeks ago, we had a cohort of college students at NBC for an afternoon, and I was able to sort of pick their brains on, how can we engage young people with the Olympics? And the biggest suggestion was fantasy. And it wasn't so much that they want to win money and bet. It was that they want to have some social currency by picking an Olympian that's going to win the 100-meter that nobody else thought might. So I think there's a huge opportunity, particularly to engage young people through fantasy.
That interest then comes back to watching and consuming the games, whether it's through linear or through streaming or however you do that. Now, Chase, I'd be curious, in the locker room, your teammates know what channel the game's being broadcast on? Is there a different sauce when you know it's on Peacock or you know it's on a big national streamer or platform?
I think we were all excited about the Big Ten Fox deal, just because that's bringing in, well, the entire deal is a $7 billion 7-year deal. So that's $1 billion a year. We're looking forward to the new gear. But in all seriousness, that revenue was really an understatement for what it could have been. And going to the female sports especially, the women's Final Four, that created a new dynamic for women's college basketball. And even the NCAA has admitted that they left value out that could have been created in that deal by bundling all 31 of the Olympic sports together. If players are at the seat, at the table while that deal is being done and they are able to capture on this value and we're incentivized to deliver, not only do we grow that $7 billion deal and receive a piece of that, but we grow it and everyone receives a piece of it. So I think in the long run, any type of equity play that makes progress in the industry benefits everyone, even if in the short run it seems like it benefits those in the minority. Everyone has a stake in giving players equity and the value that they create.
One of the many reasons why I'm such a fan of the WNBA is that because I feel like these world-class athletes are on the right side of history in every social issue, and then the first ones that we hear from, and in one collective voice. Talk to me about your relationship with the players in the league and how they have a say, if any, in terms of how their games are broadcast, where they're broadcast, and how you look at them almost as partners in a way.
Yeah, so we are a player-first organization. In 2020, we signed one of the most progressive CBAs. And I think what's really important about our initiatives is they're player-led. So in 2020, we also signed, we started a social justice council. So the social justice council will work on everything from voting rights to this year's focus is on maternal health, specifically Black maternal health, as we've seen, which is a huge crisis in our country. And I think when it comes to media rights, the players want what's best for the league because we are in growth mode. I always say we're only 12 teams, right? So we need to continue to expand. We're not going to do that through roster expansion. It's going to be through getting into more cities. But listen, as this new model changes, we want to lean heavily on our streaming platform, our D2C platform. And so you're starting to see, as we all saw this year, the RSNs that are breaking down are really just barriers to entry. If you're not in this market, then you're going to have a blackout on League Pass. And, that's a pain point for all of us. We want our fans to be able to watch the game wherever they are. So whether it's VOD, which we can then serve up to our fans after the game, we just launched the new WNBA app. And one of the best things, which you might think this is tiny, but you can actually hide scores. So there's no spoilers because we know how hard it is to catch a game live. So I think, when it comes to our players, it's about getting the game to as many fans as possible because we need to grow the game.
And Brad, back to you, now taking it to brands and marketers as these athletes have more of a voice, as they're standing out for social issues they believe in. What is your advice there for brands and marketers to support them and continue to, have their message heard as well?
Yeah, I think it's a few layers. I mean, I think in addition to, the athletes we know today, I think the interesting thing that streaming brings is it brings access to a ton of sport that potentially wasn't available before, right? Before, it required a deal on a network, on a TV, and now you can get way broader access to sport that's happening that maybe wasn't as accessible before because you couldn't actually find it. It wasn't actually broadcasted out there. I think when it comes to athletes and their positions and, on culture and society, I think it all comes back to a brand strategy. There's no difference between a brand strategy and a business strategy. Your brand strategy drives your business. And if you're clear on what your brand strategy is and you're authentic to it, it will drive your business. And finding whether it's athletes, media partners, or teams that align with your brand strategy, what your customers expect out of your brand, and then finding the right partners for that is always the best strategy.
I will play devil's advocate, though, on streaming being able to find more sports. On the other hand, it's making it really hard because I need to have my Apple Plus subscription for MLS, and I need to go to, and listen, we're on Amazon, and I love our partnership with Amazon and ESPN and Facebook and Twitter, but are we making it harder for fans when they have to use all these different platforms just to find our games?
So my perspective on it is right now, but I think that is a temporary moment in time. Like I think let's call it the fragmentation of all of that, I think is a reality we're living right now. But I think from a consumer perspective, it gets honestly, it gets very expensive, right? You've got this app and that app and $79.99 for this and $149 for this, and all of a sudden you start to look at that and you're like, whoa. And so I think that has to change. And it's going to be what's going to force the change, I think, is the thing that always does, which is the consumer is going to figure out that this is not working, and they're going to force that. So I think the complex distribution of streaming is a temporary inconvenience that is maybe not so temporary, but I don't think is going to be a problem we're going to be talking about on this stage in 4 or 5 years. It needs to be solved. And when that gets solved, then I think access is broader and can be deeper and can cover more. It is definitely a problem right now. We definitely hear it from consumers, and that means it's going to change.
Yeah, Colie, it sounds like you've been sitting in our household. My father's the biggest Boston Red Sox fan in the world, and he's like, I don't know where the game is. I'll just listen to it on the radio. And that's kind of how he figures that problem out. Dan, I'll be curious in terms of the Olympics coming up this summer, how NBC chooses to program certain events and cover certain events now that we have all these different ways and platforms and methods to consume the game. So how do you think that will all pan out, as this will be obviously the most watched Olympics ever, and we'll have so many different ways for fans to connect to the sport?
Yeah, listen, I think, first of all, Paris is going to be spectacular. If you haven't heard some of the news, the opening ceremonies are going to be on the River Seine. Total open access, 600,000 people estimated will attend versus here's my ticket, let me in the stadium. Beach volleyball under the Eiffel Tower, equestrian competition in the Gardens of Versailles. It's going to be spectacular. So there'll be a lot of demand to watch. Our approach is we want to make as much content available for people wherever they want to consume it and make the experience as simple as possible. So we will promote to our 3 biggest platforms, NBC, Peacock, and Telemundo for our Spanish language content. And from there, we'll give people updates and alerts on where they can watch their favorite athletes. But I think the big difference maker will be Peacock. We're going to be, nearly fully distributed. And Peacock allows somebody to either watch live, a simul-stream, if you will, of what's going on a broadcast network, or watch when they want, as well as watch anything, right? Because we'll have 7,000 hours. We'll take the Olympic feed, and if you want to watch Swiss equestrian, you can pull it up on Peacock. So you'll be able to get everything you want on demand.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting push, and I know this is about current streaming, but the topic up and down the cassette is all about generative AI. I mean, last year you couldn't walk 30 feet without Web3, and this year is generative AI. I was talking to a colleague over here, and you can envision a spot 18 months from now where your content is, show me everything Wayne Gretzky has done. And all of a sudden I've created my own content. Every goal, every touchdown, and the user is actually starting to. So when you talk about hitting the Swiss equestrian team on your 7,000 hours, as generative AI, I think, is going to start to catch up. And obviously that battles with rights, and it's a very complicated topic, but the ability for folks to program their own follow their player. Show me everything Sheryl Swoop did in her career. You know, I'm going to get 12,000 hours, and now I've actually curated, and how brands deal with that, how rights deal with that, how leagues deal with that, how players deal with that. So if generative AI is not the Web3 of 2023 and actually has legs, which we believe it does, the conversation just gets really, really interesting.
On every Chase Griffin touchdown, and now I've been able to watch
Yeah,
that.
there you go.
I wholeheartedly agree, but Chase has to score touchdowns first, right? Players got to play.
Oh, yeah, no,
And
absolutely.
We can't lose sight of the fact that without the competition in the grand arena, none of the secondary content will matter.
And if we get the chance to watch Chase play on a Saturday, and of course going to have a great game, Chase, I'd be curious your advice to brands, marketers out there who are looking to be in business, especially with young athletes who are still finding their voice off the field of play.
It's always said in marketing, but authenticity. I think when a player has a great game or they have something great going on off the field, it's a lot easier personally to partner with brands that have similar values. And then off of those brands, I look for equity, if I can get it, but good economic value out of the deal. And out of that economic value, part of my personal values is creating community value. And so by doing things that are authentic to me and working with brands that are authentic to me, brands that I actually like, I think it magnifies whatever performance I'm having on the field because like you said, now people are rooting for players because they can see they're really rooting for people.
Yeah.
And now that athletes are incentivized to showcase who they are as a person, what they do as a player just adds to their entire persona. And brands are starting to be able to capitalize off of that.
Colie, we talked earlier about the idea of the WNBA maybe taking some chances in terms of the game of basketball and whether it's rules or different, bells and whistles that can make the game sort of stand out. Does that apply also to broadcasting of the games? In addition to just the platforms, you see yourself in the league taking some chances with just how these games will be shot and produced?
Yeah, for sure. We've seen alternate telecasts. We love when Sue and Diana are doing, the Final Four and drinking out of their red Solo cups. I think alternate telecasts are a great way to reach the casual fan and introduce the game to more people. We're also looking at utilizing Second Spectrum and other player optical tracking devices so that we can tell those stories in a way that's really rich data and helps bring in more people into the fold. Because as we grow, that's what we need. If I could, leave you with one idea, it's invest in women, invest in the WNBA, not because, yeah, that's right, let's say it again, invest in women, not because it's the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do. We're not going anywhere. And, it's funny because you guys were saying, what I always was taught was NFL, you have fans of teams. The NBA, you're fans of players. But the WNBA, you're fans of the league. And so it's at the league level that we want to grow the game.
Well said. I'm so happy you brought up that Diana and Sue live stream because it seems like these sort of alternate screen experiences, these second screen experiences are sometimes grabbing a hold of the zeitgeist in the conversation in a way that the traditional broadcast doesn't have the opportunity to. So, Dan, I'd be curious from an NBC perspective, just the value on these kind of new ways that we're watching the games, almost like watch-alongs with our favorite athletes and celebrities.
I think they just add to love of the game. And I'm actually going to double down on what you said in terms of investing in women. When you think about the women of Team USA, the women of Team USA are going to kick ass in Paris. If you look at the past 3 games, the women of Team USA won more medals than all but 3 countries. And they're going to be as effective, as strong. That's why we will program more than 50% of our content featuring women's sports for the Olympics. We all love the passion that comes with the Olympics, but when you can root for these dynamite women actually representing their country in an awesome way, I mean, there's no better way to reach women, invest in Team USA, and I think the rest follows.
There's no time like now than to be a fan, to be able to watch these games
Yes.
and all these different methods, to be able to connect with brands. We have just about a minute left or so, and so Brad, I want to leave you with one final thought here. Just the average sports fan, Talk to me about how their experience with, as you mentioned, AI and brand involvement, whether it's gambling, whatever it is going to change in the next few years, just in terms of how they are actually understanding, watching, and experiencing these moments.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that we are only at the beginning of the various ways not only you can watch but interact with this content. You know, we've talked about streaming in a few different ways. A few weeks ago, you know, Apple came out with their new headset, which changes that experience. I mean, I think we're in this accelerated tech experiential moment in which we can't even envision the various ways in which you can add stats and features and player stories, content beside the content of the game that's going on, which I agree it does need to be played. And so I think that it's going to become more and more experiential than we've ever seen before, where we used to think experiential was something that happened here. It's going to happen in your living room. It's a huge opportunity for brands. It's a huge opportunity for platforms. And it's a huge opportunity for players and leagues. And it's going to be exciting.
The game has forever changed, and the way we watch it will continue to change as well. I thank all of you for your insights. Give a round of applause to our wonderful panel here at Sport Beach 2023. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Hello. Are we on? Are we on? Thanks. Thanks, Colie, Chase.